In this exercise, we'll be using the NetInfo library within our app in order to monitor the mobile device's network connectivity information and respond to changes. The NetInfo library was originally a part of React Native, but it's been deprecated and is now a third-party library maintained by a GitHub organization called React Native Community, which maintains this and many other helpful packages for React Native. I've included a link to their page in the additional resources if you'd like to check that out. The NetInfo installation requires what's called a scoped install. This involves putting an organization's name before the package name, prepended by the @ symbol, like this, then a / followed by the package name and version if needed. Go ahead and install it to your project, checking the written instructions for the most up-to-date command and version for this course. Then open main-component.js. At the top, we'll need two imports. First, let's import Alert and Toast Android from React Native. Then we'll import NetInfo from @react-native-community/NetInfo. And once we've done that, we can scroll down to the main component, which is all the way at the bottom, past all the navigators, and just before the style sheet. And we'll go inside the component did mount lifecycle method that's already here. There's a few different ways that we can use the NetInfo API. One way is to get information just once about the current network connection. To do so, we'll use the fetch method of the NetInfo library. This method has no parameters, and it will return a promise that resolves to a NetInfo state object. We'll access that like this using the then method. So here, we're calling this NetInfo fetch method, which returns a promise. And when that promise is resolved, then we get a NetInfo state object back, which here we have named connection info. Let me show you the documentation for this to show you that we're taking the syntax right from the documentation. In the code example within the documentation for this method, you can see they named that same NetInfo state object state, but it doesn't technically matter what you name it. What does matter is that we know that this object that came back through the promise being resolved has certain properties that we can make use of. Specifically, the property we want access to is called type. Inside this then method block, we'll check for the operating system of the device using the platform API and the ternary operator. And if it's iOS, then we'll use an alert to display the type of connection like this. Or if it's not iOS, then we'll use the Toast Android API provided by React Native to pop up what's called a toast, which is a brief message that appears overlaid on top of the current view, then fades away in a few seconds. We'll specify the duration with toastandroid.long, which is 3.5 seconds. You can see that the Toast Android API is very easy to use. It has a method, show, that you supply with two arguments, the first being the text that you want to display, and the second, an integer, a number for how long to show the toast. And the API provides two constants we can use. One is called toastandroid.short, which is 2 seconds, and the other, which we're using here, is toastandroid.long, which is 3.5 seconds. The Toast Android API, as you might guess, only works with Android. There's not a corresponding Toast API that works with iOS, at least not in the React Native core modules. So that's why we're just using an alert for iOS. You might be wondering, why are we back to using promises with the then method after we just learned how to use async await, which is supposed to be easier? To be honest, one reason I'm using it is because the examples from the documentation were written in this way, and I don't want to confuse you by changing it from the documentation style. The other reason is that actually this is going to be one of your workshop assignment tasks. This code here could be rewritten with async and await, and you'll do that during your workshop for practice, and hopefully that will give you a better handle on how it works. Async await is still fairly new syntax, and you're not going to find it being used everywhere, so it's a good idea to know both ways of doing things. We're not done yet, but let's test out what we have so far. So here, I'm reloading the application with the changes. And the main component is mounting now. And there, we see the toast pop up saying initial network connectivity type, Wi-Fi. So that appears to be working. Let me go and turn off my Wi-Fi connection for this device, then reload my app. And now you can see the toast says initial network connectivity type, cellular. Make sure your app is working in this way before you continue. Our next step will be to subscribe to network changes. We'll want to start listening for changes as soon as the application loads. So once again, we'll add our code to the main component's component did mount lifecycle method. We'll be using the netinfo method add event listener, and this method helpfully provides a function that can be used to unsubscribe the listener as its own return value. So we'll want to save that function by assigning it to a method on the class, this.unsubscribe netinfo, so we can use it later. Because we're already inside a method, we have to be sure to use the this keyword to specify that we're creating this as a method on the parent class rather than as a local variable inside component.mount. Then we'll call netinfo.addEventListener. This method takes a callback function in its parameter list. This callback function will automatically have access to the netinfo state object as an argument, so we'll pass that in as connection info. And inside this function body, we'll call another class method named this.handleConnectivityChange, which we'll define in a moment, and we'll pass that connection info along to that method. And now we'll make use of the unsubscribe netinfo method we set up earlier. We'll use another React lifecycle method, component_well_onMount. And we'll call the unsubscribe netinfo method here to stop listening for connection changes when the main component unmounts. Now all we have left to do is add the handleConnectivityChange method. When there is a change in the connection state, we'll have our application respond by popping up either a toast for Android or an alert for iOS with a message about that change. And that message will vary depending on the new connection type. Let's set up a connection message variable, and we'll use the let keyword for this so that this variable's value can be reassigned in the following code. We'll initialize it to this string, "You are now connected to an active network." Then we'll set up a switch statement which takes the connection info object's type property. And here are our options for the type. I'm only going to set up cases for the first 4. So, if it's none, we'll change the connection message to say, "No network connection is active." Then be sure to use the break statement. For the unknown case, we'll change the message to "The network connection status unknown," and break. Then for cellular, we'll say, "You are now connected to a cellular network." and break. And for Wi-Fi, we'll say, you are now connected to a Wi-Fi network. And break. This last break is technically not necessary, but we'll leave it here in case we add more cases later. Then we wouldn't accidentally get an error because we forgot to add a break. I'm not using a default case here because we already initialized the connection message variable above the switch statement with a message that should work for all other cases, such as Bluetooth or WiMAX. Then after the end of the switch statement, we'll check for the platform OS, and for iOS, we'll generate an alert with the connection message. And for Android, we'll generate a toast with Toast Android using the long duration of 3.5 seconds. Let's test out this final version. Let me turn on my Wi-Fi now. And if I wait for a moment, the toast comes up saying that I'm now connected to Wi-Fi. Let's try it the other way and turn Wi-Fi off. And now you can see a toast saying that I'm now connected to cellular. Test your app as well and make sure that you receive these messages when the network connection changes.